Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyagolu. So, a deal in Sudan sees the ousted Prime Minister, Abdullah Hamdok, back in office. But how does this restore order in the country? He was ousted nearly a month ago, and he made his first appearance on national TV since the coup to sign a political deal with the military generals, the same generals who had ousted and arrested him, and the general in one case who had personally held Mr. Hamdok in house arrest in their own house. The international community has reacted positively, though, to the deal. The African Union, the EU, Britain, Canada, and Saudi Arabia said it was a step towards the return to constitutional order after last month's military coup. The US called it an encouraging move, but Sudanese opposition groups have labeled it a betrayal. And all this taking place after weeks of protests. So has the military coup been reversed, or is Mr. Hamdok essentially a powerless prime minister?
Signing this framework agreement opens the door to addressing all issues of the transition and its challenges. Certainly, in this partnership between civilians and the military, we have achieved a lot in it. Getting out of international isolation, Sudan's exit from the list of countries sponsoring terrorism, the economy and peace. But there remain very great challenges facing us. When I accepted this assignment as a transitional prime minister, I knew perfectly well that the road was not paved with roses. I knew that the road was difficult and did not go in a straight line. But with the availability of will and joint action, we can take our country to safety. I will not tire of repeatedly saying, let us agree on how Sudan is ruled and leave the choice of how Sudan is governed to the great Sudanese people. We have been living in a crisis for a long time, and today, by signing this political declaration, we were able to establish a real foundation for a transitional period as we envisioned it and as the Sudanese people envisioned it.
Well, for more about this, I'm joined now on the line by the African Affairs analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, John Offei Ansah. John, great to see you. As always, you know a lot about these things, much more than we do. What do you know about this deal? Is it another power-sharing arrangement between the civilians and the military in essence?
It's nothing less than that. It's just a return to the status quo, where the Sovereign Council comprising the military and the civilians led by Abdullah Hamdok, which sort of the Sovereign Council oversaw, the administration of the civilian-led, administration led by Hamdok. So to me, it is just a return to the status quo.
That return to the status quo, though, is not being accepted by many people. I mean, the opposition and the political parties are rejecting this deal, and there are protests on the streets rejecting any kind of power-sharing arrangement and calling for full civilian rule. How problematic is that?
It's going to be problematic because the opposition, especially the Forces of Freedom and Change, that part of the coalition that actually nominated Abdullah Hamdok in the first place 2 years ago to lead the civilian part of the administration, are kicking against this new agreement because look, that coup of October 25th was uncalled for. It was part of the manipulation process by the military, to stay in the political sphere, okay? And again, since the October 25th coup, 40 civilians have died. And the Forces of Freedom and Change, that coalition is calling for justice. So in part, that is why they are resisting this move, because they see nothing new in this new agreement whatsoever.
So, the opposition no longer interested in power sharing with the military any longer, but General Al-Burhan is determined to remain in control of Sudan. So what is the future for the country? I mean, who or what will determine what happens next?
To be the people, but then at the end of the day, it appears the military, led by General Burhan, still has the upper hand or the stronger hand. Okay, but Abdullah Hamdok, actually look at the bigger picture, because before the October 25th coup, when this administration was set up 2 years ago, I mean, the administration under Hamdok have actually really worked hard, to, number one, Sudan was removed from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Okay, the U.S. lifted sanctions, against Sudan. Okay, and again, there are the two political reforms, like lifting fuel subsidies and floating the currency. Okay, and they were in line for a debt relief of more than $56 billion that they were in external debt. Most of it was going to be reduced. So the October 25th could jeopardize the small, or the modest gains, they've made since 2019. So Prime Minister Abdullah was looking at a bigger picture, and he believes that there is unfinished business. He needs to see this to the end, so that at least Sudan will come back on an even economic keel.
Well, I mean, the points you make come across as quite sensible. Nevertheless, I mean, Mr. Hamdok now charged with forming an independent cabinet, and this will be a cabinet that, for all intents and purposes, is always under the authoritarian heel of the military. So it doesn't really matter what's written on paper. Ultimately, it's clear, isn't it, that whenever the military wants, it can rework political relations in the country like it did in October. And of course, it has veto power on the process.
Exactly. Abdullah says he's going to form a government of technocrats. Yes, that's fine. Okay, with a view to continuing, the progress, it made with the international IMF, the World Bank, and other international partners. Okay, but still, no matter what, the military led by Burhan still has the upper hand. And like you said, yes, it got some veto powers. And I believe it was some of these veto powers that precipitated the split between the civilian and the military wings of the previous regime that also put this coup on October 25th. So again, nothing much changes. But one thing I must say that I must point out is that the military is closely allied to Middle East, like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. And I believe that when UAE and Saudi Arabia denounced the coup, I think it took some wind out of the sails of the military. So that was, I believe, one factor that led to this 180 degree turn by the military yesterday, right? So I believe that the authority that they used to exert, in the previous incarnation, if you like, okay, might be diminished. It might not be as strong as it used to be in this new incarnation.
Well, I mean, to some extent, in support of what you've said, I mean, the US, the EU, Canada, the UK, Saudi Arabia, they've all come out to say that this is an important first step. But of course, there have to be a number of other critical or crucial steps that have to follow, not least a recommitment to the full transition towards civilian rule in Sudan.
Yes, they made that commitment. Both General Burhan and Abdullah Hamdok made that commitment yesterday. And look, after the October 25th coup, the U.S. Withheld a proposed $700 million aid to the country. The World Bank, the IMF also followed suit, and France, which was then considering a cancellation of debts by Sudan to France, also started reconsidering that position. So all this, coupled with what I said earlier, with the condemnation by their allies in the Middle East, might actually tamper things on the part of the military and make sure that the transition process moves unhindered.
Yes, and protests, of course, still taking place. Not a good idea for the people of Sudan to take their foot off the pedal in trying to ensure that the military hears their voices and maintains its commitment or reinstated commitment to the transition to civilian rule.
Yes, I do agree with you. It's not a good idea. And we shouldn't forget that, look, it was the civilian protests that precipitated the ouster of the former president Omar al-Bashir after 30 or more years in office. And the civilians, now realize the power that they have. And I'm not sure that they are going to relent, right, in their efforts, in their efforts to diminish the influence of the military. What they want now is a complete disengagement of the military from Sudan political sphere. And if they cannot achieve that, at least they will keep on protesting, they will keep on pushing until there's a diminution of the military's influence in the political sphere.
And I don't know whether you touched on this briefly earlier, John, but is there likely to be some accountability for the at least 40 people killed in the period between 25th October and today?
That is yet to be seen, whether people will be held to account for the 40 people that died. We don't know yet, but anything is possible.
So in summary then, John, and thank you as always for your analysis, I mean, the central questions remain: how far will the power of the military be reduced, and how far will Mr. Hamdok and the cabinet he forms be willing to accept continued military oversight with the threat of turning the tables whenever it doesn't suit them?
I believe that the reason for the coup on October 20 was in part, to sideline Hamdok. Because the guy, we know him, Africa Briefing, my editor interviewed him in Addis Ababa when he was with the ECA a few years ago before he became Prime Minister. And my editor actually respects him. He's a man of principle, okay? And I believe that was one reason why I believe the military found out that the guy was not malleable enough for them. I believe that is why one reason why I believe they said the coup. So I believe that they now won his respect, because between October 25th and yesterday, Hamdok stuck to his guns, right? He did not compromise. Okay, and like I said earlier, he signed an agreement yesterday because he was looking at a bigger picture. So I believe that the influence, the authority of the military will be lessened, in due course.
John, thank you very much indeed. John Offei Ansah, who is the African Affairs Analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing.